The Majority Leader.
I ask unanimous consent that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Attorney General Barr transmitted to Congress his summary of the special counsel's principal conclusions from his investigation into Russia's efforts to interfere in the 2016 election. The result of that investigation is being hailed as good news for the president, and it certainly is that. But really, it's good news for our entire country. It's good news that our law enforcement professionals know much more about Russia's malevolent attempts to interfere in American elections, and it's good news that we can conclusively set aside the notion that the president and his team had somehow participated in those attacks on our democracy. According to the Attorney General, the special counsel's in-depth investigation did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia in its effort to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election. That really says it all. Further, Attorney General Barr and Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein concluded the investigation did not establish that the president engaged in obstruction of justice. So, 2 years, thousands of subpoenas, hundreds of search warrants, hundreds of witnesses, millions of taxpayer dollars, and these are the findings, Madam President. No collusion, no conspiracy, no obstruction. What the investigation did produce, it seems, is a deep examination of Russia's efforts to interfere in the 2016 election. The Attorney General reports that Russia carried out online disinformation campaigns and computer hacking efforts designed to sow discord in our nation and interfere in American politics. It is deeply disturbing that the Obama administration was apparently insufficiently prepared to anticipate and counter these Russian threats. It was hardly a secret prior to November 2016 that Putin's Russia was not and is not our friend. And yet, for years, the previous administration ignored, excused, and failed to confront Putin's malign activities, both at home and abroad. I'm glad the special counsel's report will contribute new insight and new understanding to our awareness of Russian activities. I look forward to the release of more information in the coming days, as the Attorney General has said he intends to do in consultation with Special Counsel Mueller. And I look forward as well to the continuing parallel work of our Senate colleagues on the Select Committee on Intelligence to study the threats that foreign interference pose to our institutions. So like I said, in any sane political moment, all of this would be very welcome news to all Americans in a normal time. But we know that, amazingly, the reaction in some corners of the far left has seemed not to be celebration, but rather disappointment. Huge components of the Democratic Party and their media allies have spent literally years spinning intricate theories about this presidency and trying to sell the American people on their wild claims. It's as if many of our Democratic colleagues are still just unable to process the simple fact, yes, the American people elected this Republican president over his Democratic opponent. We're faced with new evidence every day that our Republican policies are delivering exactly the change that middle-class families voted for back in 2016. Yet even still, many on the left remain convinced that only conspiracy and corruption could possibly explain why they might actually lose an election. Well, in the real world, the American people hired this president to clean up the mess of the preceding 8 years. That's exactly what we've set about doing. And the results are clear. The nation is clearly better off than it was 2 years ago. So I sincerely hope that now at last our friends on the left will be able to put aside their fixation on permanently relitigating their loss in 2016 and actually join in the productive work that the rest of us have been proudly engaged in for the past 2 years and counting. Well, unfortunately, Madam President, the events of the last few months have not exactly indicated that productive, practical cooperation is what our Democratic colleagues have in mind. To the contrary, the nation has watched the Democratic Party has engaged in a collective headlong sprint toward the left, as far to the left as possible, as fast as possible. They proposed a massive rewriting of the rules of American politics. They proposed scrapping Medicare, slapping its name on a brand new one-size-fits-all government insurance plan, and then making American families' existing private insurance policies illegal. And of course, they proposed what the Senate will be voting on later this week, the famous Green New Deal. My colleagues and I will have plenty more to say on this subject in the coming days. So today, I just want to say that I could not be more glad that the American people will have the opportunity to learn precisely where each one of their senators stand on this radical, top-down, socialist makeover of the entire U.S. economy. Middle-class families will get to see if their senators have been wooed by the disjointed contents of leftish daydreams. Hardworking Americans in Kentucky and around the country employed in the energy and manufacturing industries will get to see if their senators support eliminating all fossil fuels and suffocating their livelihoods. Homeowners who take pride in their hard-earned investment will get to see if their senators are in favor of forcible D.C. remodeling of every building in America. Working-class Americans who are benefiting from our growing economy and historic job market will learn if their senators support turning away from free enterprise and implementing a new government-driven employment system. Families who have to budget for household expenses will see which senators vote to increase their electricity bills by what one analysis pegs as, listen to this, $300 a month. And of course, every American taxpayer will get to learn if their senators support saddling our nation with the astronomical cost of this socialist fantasy, tens and tens of trillions of dollars, a tax burden that would be certain to hurt not just wealthy Americans, but the middle class as well. On all of these questions, on this whole Democratic effort to rebrand all the failed ideas of the 20th century socialism with a little green paint, every member of this body will have the opportunity to cast a clear vote this very week. American people, Madam President, deserve to know which senators can reject this crippling proposal right away, and which senators find themselves unable to do that. And that's exactly what they'll learn later this week. But first, later today, the Senate will vote to advance the nomination of yet another of President Trump's qualified choices for the federal bench. Richard Beatty of Arizona has been tapped to serve on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. She brings with her well-rounded experience as a legal professional. She's a two-time graduate of Arizona State University and has served with distinction at the Department of Justice, the Office of the U.S. Attorney for the District of Arizona, as a special counsel in private practice, and most recently as a magistrate judge. Our colleagues on the Judiciary Committee saw fit to forward Ms. Beatty's nomination with bipartisan support, and I hope all senators will join me in voting to advance it later today.
Madam President,
Democratic leader.
first, all of us heard the sad news today. Nice for him, sad for us, that Tom Udall will not seek re-election. He is one of the most principled, hardest-working senators we have. He's bright, he's dedicated, and he has such integrity, which runs in the Udall family. When he gets up to speak, every senator, Democrat and Republican, always knows how well thought out his remarks will be and how sincere they are. He's not doing this for some angle or political purpose. He's just the kind of person the Founding Fathers wanted to serve in the United States Senate. His leadership on reforming the campaign finance system, on protecting the environment, on advocating on behalf of Native American communities, shepherding legislation to protect America from harmful chemicals, and so much more has been invaluable. We'll all be saying more about Tom in the next little while, but we will miss him. He's been a wonderful senator, a great friend, and a wonderful member of this caucus. Now, Madam President, I'm going to speak briefly on the matter of climate change, and then I'll address the matters relating to the special counsel's investigation. During the last month, this chamber has been the forum for debate of a topic I never thought I'd see Republicans raise on their own: climate change. They've long been the party of climate change denial, with President Trump as the climate change denier-in-chief. It's an awfully difficult position to defend. It becomes more difficult every week and every month, and it's directly at odds with strong consensus views of scientists in the United States around the globe. As our weather changes, as we face more disasters, the average American more and more is saying, uh-oh, climate change. I wonder what the people in Nebraska and Iowa think, that they've gotten these huge floods, so devastating to them. So it's long past time for Republicans to take the issue seriously. This chamber is supposed to debate the most serious issues of our day. Climate change is at the very top of the list and shouldn't be an exception. That's why for a month, all 47 Democrats have asked our Republican colleagues 3 simple questions which none of them will answer. They're going to have to answer it sooner or later. 1, do you agree that climate change is real? 2, do you agree it's caused by human action? And 3, do you believe that Congress should take immediate action to combat its effects? We're not prescribing one part or another. We're saying, let's debate it. Let's not do a sham vote that's meant to embarrass one person or another. This is too serious an issue for that. Republicans owe the American people some real answers, not games. Because just over the last week, as I mentioned, in the plains of Iowa, we saw the devastating effects of climate change with devastating clarity. The kind of weather we saw in the Iowa plains has no precedent. It was the equivalent of a Category 2 hurricane lambasting the heart of the Middle West. Our hearts are with the people whose homes were destroyed or damaged, whose farms are decimated, the animals that were lost. The science is clear. A changing climate and warmer air make these freakish weather incidents more likely, more intense. Now, Republicans may want to keep their heads in the sand. I think that's a loser for them, especially among younger voters, younger voters, younger voters. Like in so many other issues, our Republicans are clinging to the past, not looking at what's happened. But Republicans do so at their own peril. With each passing year, their climate change denial is increasingly out of step with American people. A majority of Americans, 2/3, including a large percentage of Republicans, believe climate change is real, believe human action has accelerated its pace, and they know it for a very simple reason. They can see it themselves. On the South Shore of Long Island, very Republican areas, all of a sudden, after Sandy, understood the need to address climate change. And that's happening all over the country. Every time a fire devastates California, another hurricane strikes the Gulf states, biblical flooding strikes some part of the country or other, the American people see the effects of climate change. They see them personally, not theoretically. That's what's happening. Indeed, scientists in the U.S. and Canada now say that evidence for climate change has reached a, quote, gold standard of certainty. And so what have Republicans done about it? Rather than take these warnings seriously, they choose to play games with our planet's future. Rather than get serious about the world our children will inherit, Leader McConnell is elected to push a sham vote on their version of the Green New Deal. And they'll play that game right before voting on funding for natural disaster relief. Let there be no doubt, these disasters are magnified precisely because of climate change. I cannot fathom the level of cognitive dissonance required to schedule these two votes right after one another. But, Mr. President, no one's fooled by the Republican attempts to posture and politicize climate change. If they really want to debate the issue, let's debate it. Let's bring different views to the floor. Let's see how people vote. Let's not put something on the floor for the first time, a serious proposal on climate change, which the leader has never put on the floor. Let's debate them all. We're not getting that to happen. Oh, no. Just a game. Politics, 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 which the American people on this issue and so many others dislike. So, let Republicans come at us with all they've got. The facts are on the people who understand that climate change is real. It's no wonder our Republican colleagues don't want a real debate but a game. But the American people are not going to be fooled by the Republican stunt vote. Democrats were prepared to take bold action to address the climate change crisis head on. That's why we're pushing for a creation of a bipartisan committee on climate change so we can examine this issue with the level of urgency and depth it deserves. I urge my colleagues on the other side who know the truth to speak out and join us as we try and put a halt to the greatest threat of our time. Now on another matter. Last night, Attorney General Barr delivered a brief letter to Congress that included his summary of Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. We have all seen the Attorney General's letter, but none of us, neither the Congress nor the public, has seen the report itself. The Justice Department has declined even to say how many pages the report includes, as if that were some sort of state secret. After all, let's not forget why we're here in the first place. 2 years ago, a hostile power attacked our democracy. As Mr. Barr's letter said, Russian actors, with the backing of Mr. Putin, waged a sophisticated and malicious campaign of disinformation and falsehood in order to influence the outcome of our elections. That's never happened before. The American people deserve to see the documentation. What did they do? Who did they approach? What happened? Sweep an issue like this under the rug when the security of our wellspring elections, fair, uninterfered with by foreign power elections, is at stake? So it's evident, it's self-evident, overwhelmingly, in the public interest for the Mueller report to be released to the people. The American people simply want the truth. Each American, if he chooses or she chooses, can read the report for themselves and draw their own conclusions. Whether or not you're a supporter of President Trump or not, whatever you feel, there is no good reason not to make the report public. On March 14th, just prior to the recess, the House of Representatives surprised a lot of our Republican friends here in the Senate. They passed a resolution calling for the report to be made public. Guess what the vote was? 420 to nothing. Even the most vociferous defenders of President Trump, Mr. Meadows, Mr. Jordan, voted yes. When the resolution arrived here in the Senate, I asked unanimous consent and that it would be adopted. I thought it would be. Regrettably, one senator objected. The senator from South Carolina, my friend Senator Graham, said he wouldn't agree to the resolution unless it was amended to call for a special prosecutor to investigate Hillary Clinton. And so the Senate was unable to pass a resolution that passed the House unanimously without controversy. In fact, President Trump has said even before the report came out and repeatedly afterwards, several times, he supported passage of the House resolution. He supports making it public. So have a good number of my Republican colleagues, a whole bunch today. So in a moment, I'm going to renew my request of March 14th that the Senate adopt House concurrent resolution calling for public release of the Mueller report. Now that President Trump supports public release of the report, there's no good reason for anyone to object to this request. It's a simple request for transparency, nothing more, nothing less, not to make a decision as to what you believe, not to say what we ought to do about it, just to make it public. Transparency, a great American virtue that we've tried to uphold through the centuries. So, I hope I will not hear a request from the other side to amend the resolution to call for a different special counsel investigation. If there's going to be objection, the American people deserve to know why. Why should this report not be made public? Not why something else shouldn't be done, not some extraneous issue. Why shouldn't this report be made public? And I'd ask my friend the leader, because I see him rising, I imagine he's going to object, to give a reason why this report should not be made public, not that something else should be done at the same time. This is serious stuff. If there's an objection raised, it will only serve to frustrate the compelling public interest that's made in the special counsel's report and making it public. Therefore, Mr. President, I'll now give the Senate another opportunity to join every one of their colleagues in calling for the public release of this important report. And so, Madam President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of H-Con Res 24, expressing the sense of the Congress that the report of Special Counsel Mueller should be made available to the public and to Congress, and which is at the desk. Further, that the concurrent resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object. As I said just a few moments ago, it's certainly good news for the country that the special counsel concluded that there is no evidence that the Trump campaign collaborated or conspired with the Russian government to influence the last presidential election. It's also good news for the country that due to the special counsel's work, we now have more insight into Russia's efforts to interfere with our democratic institutions. Now, I've consistently supported the proposition that the special counsel should be allowed to finish his work without interference. The work of the special counsel, however, is not yet complete. Neither is the work of the Department of Justice. The Attorney General told us yesterday that he's working with the special counsel to determine how much of the special counsel's report can be produced without violating the law and without jeopardizing other ongoing matters, including other matters initiated by the special counsel. The special counsel and the Justice Department ought to be allowed to finish their work in a professional manner. Now, my good friend, the Democratic leader, was all for allowing the special counsel to conduct his work without political interference when it might be politically advantageous to him. But apparently, my friend from New York is not for allowing the special counsel to complete his work with the Justice Department according to his best professional and legal judgment, when that might be inconvenient to my friend's own current political purposes. To date, the Attorney General has followed through on his commitments to the Congress. One of those commitments is that he intends to release as much information as possible. I certainly welcome that commitment to transparency, as do others. But to the extent that the Attorney General, in consulting with the special counsel, believes it is important to protect sensitive sources and methods, protect material that could affect ongoing investigations and prosecutions, and is legally protected, then he deserves the time to work through these issues. So I'm going to object in order to allow the special counsel and the Justice Department to finish their careful, professional review of a no doubt voluminous record, a record that likely contains sensitive, classified, and legally protected material. For all of those reasons, Mr. President, I object.
Mr. President,
The objection is heard.
Mr. President, I'll be
The
brief.
minority leader's
The
recognized.
resolution does not say it has to be done immediately. The resolution certainly allows for the Attorney General to make sure that nothing is released that violates the law. All it says is it ought to be released. It is hard to understand why the majority leader wouldn't be for that resolution. None of his objections, none, are in the words of the report. In fact, the words of the report are very simple. It should, a sense of the Congress that it should be released. Not when, not in violation of the law, not in a hurried matter, just be released. So I'm sort of befuddled by at least the majority leader's reasoning in this regard, because it is not in the words of this resolution. Yield the floor.
Majority leader.
The country and the president have had to wait for 2 years. It's been going on for 2 years. This very extensive investigation took 2 years to be concluded. So look, it's not unreasonable to give the special counsel and the Justice Department just a little time to complete their review in a professional and responsible manner. Remember, as I said earlier, we're likely dealing here with potential other prosecutions, classified information, damaging people's reputations. There's no evidence that the Attorney General is not going to produce as much information as possible for all of us. And that's why I objected. I think it's a reasonable thing to do. We've been waiting for a long time for this report to wrap up. It's largely good news, not just for the president, but for the country.
Mr. President,
Minority leader.
again, this language was good enough for every Republican in the Senate, as well as every Democrat. The president himself says it should be released. It's hard to understand why the majority leader should stand alone with objections no one else found to be reasonable or sustainable and oppose this resolution. The report should be made public, and the Senate should resolve that it should be. I yield the floor.